Well, hello, Internet. It's been a long time, but I'm back. I had some minor health issues, but along the way, over the past couple months, I think I learned something pretty cool. And I really wanted to share it with everybody out there that would like to learn. Today, well, basically, about 11, almost a year ago, I started reading a bunch of books about how to write a novel. I've always read and been fascinated by reading fictions and nonfiction. This specifically is for fiction, however. And I read about 14 books, the best books on writing a novel. And I thought, why don't I try? I didn't know if I'd succeed or not. Well, I did. I actually wrote a book. It's like a real book and everything. It's pages and it's huge. It's like an 83,000 word novel. So it's pretty huge. And in this video, I want to teach you how to do the same thing if you're interested. Now, I thought it's one thing to have a slideshow where you're sort of telling people what to do. So, what I thought I would do instead is let's take a book that everybody knows, the most successful book ever, and let's apply all of these principles to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And you're going to find through this analysis that it follows pretty much everything. So, what exactly am I going to cover in this video, which is going to be long and in depth, but there's no advertisements, so nothing's going to get in your way of learning. Basically, like I said, I took about 14 different books, and they were on plot, they were on writing descriptive text, they were on writing poetry, they were on writing effective dialogue, and so forth and so on. And I sort of crammed them all into this one video. I'm going to start off with coming up with different ideas for your book. We're going to talk about how to plot effectively without hampering creativity. We're going to cover creating characters and scenes, and I'm going to show you how to do this in massive depth. Also, how to keep your readers guessing, or how to keep your readers just interested in your book so they keep reading. How to incorporate moral development, which is something that is almost always done in successful books. We're going to talk about how to use and create effective revelations, how changing desires affect the book, and how that is important in maintaining your readers' attention. We're going to talk about how to effectively initiate a final battle that is satisfying. Like I said, the core principles of writing effective and descriptive text, core principles of writing effective dialogue, tools that I used to increase productivity. Not selling anything. If you look in the description, there's no links to affiliate links. Again, like I said, how to use Harry Potter as an effective guide for writing stories. This isn't just aimed at people that want to write a book like Harry Potter. My book has nothing to do with magic or anything like that. I'm just using it as an example. Say like, you should do this. And then I'm going to jump over and say, look, they did this in Harry Potter. That's basically what I mean. And all these principles can be utilized to create pretty much any type of fictional book. I'm going to show you how to have fun researching and basically the process of turning an idea into a finished novel. But also these approaches can be used to write short stories or novellas and so forth. So basically, where are we going to start off on, this great journey? To increase your odds of writing a great story, you must consider every single part of your story to be important. You can't just focus on the hero and just write what the hero's doing and then randomly people just pop up. You need to have a great hero. You need to have great villains. You need to have great allies. You need to have a great story world. You need to have a symbol web. I'll get more into that, but basically a symbol web is an object of importance that you introduce into the story, and then it appears in scenes as the story progresses. And by having it there, it instantly makes the reader feel a certain thing. A great symbol web from Harry Potter would be the lightning bolt on his forehead. Okay, there's an example. I'm going to you have to have great plot, great side characters. Like I said, moral discovery is very important. And overall, you just need to write a story that is important to you as a writer. I know that whenever I created my characters, if I ever had one of them die, I actually felt sad. This is like nothing, someone that doesn't even exist. But I know the character so well and I know their backstory so well, and I know all the people that like them and love them. And when they die, it should actually hurt. And I'm going to show you how to do that. What you're going to start off with first is you're going to try to create numerous different premises for your story. And then you're going to want to pick the best ones from that. The difference between a premise is basically like one sentence explanation of what's going to happen over the course of your story, while a designing principle is going to be your whole entire story from basically from beginning to end in a couple sentences. So it's a more elaborate description of what your premise is. And this is just the overall essence of your story. So you could use Star Wars as an example of a premise that's not all that great. Basically, it is when a princess falls into mortal danger, a young man appears and develops the skills required to save the princess and ultimately ends up defeating the forces of evil. There you go. There's a basic premise. A designing principle, however, gets into more detail, as you'll see. So basically, you want to write something that you really, really enjoy. Like in my book, there's a ton of things kind of that happened in my real life. So you might also have certain beliefs that you want to bring across in your story. Do that. That is very important whenever you're coming up with your general premise of what you're going to do. You could also think about creating a list of all the things you wish you read in books, or things that you wish you saw in a movie. Guess what? You control the entire world and you can make it do whatever you want. And you should. You want it to be very important to you. Then what we're going to do is we're going to brainstorm the many different paths your ideas can take. And then you're going to choose the best of those. You're going to use, in this situation, a lot of what if scenarios and think about the most ridiculous and imagine, things that you could possibly ever imagine at this point in your creation of your novel. You want to ask just a lot of what ifs in this circumstance. Now, here's some different Harry Potter premises, and what I'm utilizing here is just a story world, and I'm sort of guessing what J.K. Rowling might have thought about whenever she was conceptualizing different premises for Harry Potter, knowing the world that she wanted to create. So you could have a premise like this. A child discovers they have magical powers and attends a school for wizards. Obviously, that's what she did. A child is accepted into a magical school and becomes a dark wizard. So this would be along the lines of if the story was instead focused on Tom Riddle, which later on in the books it kind of was. Another example of this would maybe be a book like Deadly Education. Much darker story, but still a great story. 4 wizards with differing beliefs create a school to train young wizards. Okay, that's basically what Hogwarts is. People become aware of the existence of wizards. When I say people, I mean muggles in this circumstance, and they become hostile towards them. Okay, so there's some different premises pulled from the Harry Potter world. Then what you want to do is create a designing principle. This is what I was talking about, where you have a couple sentences that pretty much cover the entire length of your story. In this circumstance with Harry Potter, that would be a boy the world said would never amount to anything. Through his magical gifts, learns to become a great man and saves the world. He saves the world in the first book, I guess, pretty much. Otherwise, Voldemort would become immortal. He attends a school for magicians, and his spectacular achievements grow as he's forced to ultimately confront the evil Lord Voldemort. Okay, so that's the difference between a premise, which is like one pretty short sentence, to a designing principle, which very much covers the entire story in a couple sentences. Then what you will need to do is determine your best character in your idea. You want to create a whole bunch of different characters that could potentially be in it. They could be characters like we had in the premise. Remember in the premise, so I was talking about Harry Potter, I was talking about the wizards, I was talking about Tom Riddle, who ultimately is Voldemort. You want to look at those premises and say, wait a minute, is there a character that resides in this premise that is very fascinating? You want to look at that specific character. You want to look for complex characters, even if they're not likable, because this character needs to be so interesting that they're going to drive the course of all the action that's going to be in your story. So they need to be a pretty fascinating character. You need to also ask yourself, do you like the way that they act and the way that they think? so that you can somehow put yourself within it. And we can use, again, Harry Potter in this example. If we talk about I guess, the four main characters. So first you have Hermione. She's out of place in a non-magical family and yearns for a more exciting world. Okay. So you could list out different characters, one sentence of the character, and look for which one is the most interesting. Then we come upon Harry, who survived an attack from an evil wizard as a baby and lives a neglected and non-magical world. We have Ron, an overshadowed child in a magical family who's seeking to do great things for himself and stand up there and, I'm Ron. Then we have Tom Riddle, who would be an orphan with magical aptitude, who has a general disgust for muggles, and he wants to achieve great power. Okay? And you could look at those different lists of potential characters, and then they could potentially drive your story or just grow it so that you have a better idea of what's going to be coming. Then you want to get a sense of the central conflict in your story. So you want to ask yourself who ultimately in this story is going to be fighting who over what. And ultimately, the answer to this question is what your story ultimately is going to be about. And all conflict in your story is also going to boil down to this. Again, we have an example from Harry Potter. The central conflict revolves around Voldemort and his quest to regain power, and Harry's connection with him, and his need to stop him. Then what you're going to do is determine your hero's possible character change, which is very important. And until I studied all this stuff, I never really realized how important character change is. And once you learn all of this stuff about creating a novel, if you're reading a book, or you are watching a movie, you're going to see all of it. And you're also going to see movies that failed. You're going to know why they failed. Well, they didn't have any character change. They didn't have good conflict. They didn't have good revelations. They didn't have good characters. And you're going to know why. So maybe someone in Hollywood might watch this and get something out of it. But basically, character change is just simply what your hero experiences by going through their struggle. The general formula for this I have is going to be moral and psychological weaknesses that your hero has. Your main allies are also going to have it, as well as your main villain or opponent is also going to have defined moral and psychological weaknesses. You add to that the action, and that's going to ultimately lead to a changed person. If you're wondering what's the difference between a moral and a psychological weakness, a psychological weakness is a weakness your character has that's hurting themselves, and a moral weakness is a character flaw your character has that is hurting other people. And in this circumstance, what you need to do is ask yourself, how do the actions taken in the story affect or change the weaknesses of a character that you ultimately want to overcome? And this can be either in a negative or a positive way. And all these things have to be changed by the end of your story. And you need to think about the basic actions over the course of your story in developing this that would best force your character to deal with their weaknesses and change. So by going through this process, it's sort of a massive way of creating a map for your entire story. And you're just going to have so many different ideas, and then get into some other different ways of organizing all these ideas. An example from Harry Potter. In the beginning of the book, what is Harry's weakness? Well, the book starts off with Harry Potter having low self-esteem. He believes he has a bleak future, and he's bullied by everybody. Okay. The action he's going to take is he embraces his identity, I guess I should say, and he faces numerous different challenges over the course of the book, and he confronts bullies. And the overall character change is he goes from having this low self-esteem type of character, and he's going to transform himself into someone who is brave and develops a sense of belonging in this world, and even a family, I guess you should say. Then we're going to move on and figure out the hero's moral choice. And this is going to be the central theme of a story. And it's often going to be crystallized by some sort of moral choice that your character is going to have to take. And this moral choice is going to normally occur at the end. Your hero must basically select normally one of two possible choices. And again, we can use Harry Potter as an example here. At the end of the story, he gets the Sorcerer's Stone, and it provides immortality. It provides immense, pretty much, wealth. And Harry has to decide, should he keep it or should he give it away? And of course, he gives it to Dumbledore, who then goes on to destroy it. And this is all to prevent Voldemort ultimately from coming into power. All right. So we have all those different things laid out there at the beginning. And like I said, this is a process that once you go through it, I think it's almost impossible for you not to write a novel after. And now we're going to move on to what is called the 22-step story structure. And I learned a lot about this from a book called The Anatomy of Story. I highly recommend that book. And what it does is it allows you to create an organic, a living plot, something that feels real. And it's an extremely common structure that you can find in pretty much all good books and all good movies. And we'll go through the process of it. It's just an easy way to create plot. But I want you to also understand that it is, just because it is structured, it is not going to hamper your creativity in any way. I never really felt like I was hampered, and I actually wish I would have utilized this more. This is basically the frame from which you're going to build your house on. Then how often do you see the frame of a house? You don't. It's hidden. But it is there, and without it, your house falls over. So, and your story will fall over also if you don't create a good structure. Or at the very least, you'll have really bad chapters, and you won't know how to fix them. So that's why we create a highly structured plot. It's basically going to be, if you wonder what plot is, it's basically just the main events that happen in your story and how they interrelate with each other. So creating this structure, like I said, is not going to in any way inhibit your overall creativity. Then what we're going to do, so that's the basics of it. The first process we're going to go through in creating this 22-point structure is we're going to define our self-revelation, or this is all the hero is going to have, but your main allies also, and your opponent normally has them also. The moral and psychological needs, and the desire. And the desire, all these things get a little bit bigger as we go on. But basically, they represent the changes your main character is going to go throughout the story. By defining these, we know up front what the hero falsely believes is their way of succeeding. That is the desire. And you're going to use it to fool the reader into thinking, well, if the hero gets this, game over, they won. Well, that's not true. You're going to create a lot of false beliefs with your reader, and that's going to make the story more interesting. Then we're going to define the flaw with the hero that is hurting others. Remember, this is our moral need. Then you're going to move on from there to the psychological need. And this is the psychological need. This is the weakness your hero has that is hurting themselves. Then we're going to have our self-revelation. And this occurs whenever the hero figures out what their real goal is, and that it is not the desire that we start off believing. Again, let's use Harry Potter as an example. With Harry Potter, revelation, he discovers his strength comes from love and friendship, not from magic. Okay, that's the revelation that he has. And this is after the trapdoor incident where he could not survive without the help of Hermione and Ron. His desire at the very beginning of the story is just simply to get away from the Dursleys and go to Hogwarts. Okay, so we believe that at the very beginning of the story, if he figures out how to do that, great, game over. That's the end of the story, which obviously it is not. His psychological need is to find a family and self-worth. He finds that at Hogwarts between Dumbledore and Hermione and Ron and all the other different characters. His moral need, this is, remember, his weakness that is hurting other people. He needs to learn to trust himself and make moral choices, and also stand up for what's right, even though it might be difficult. Then we're going to start building our ghost, which is just the backstory events that are important for our main character. So you want to have, and you're going to ease this out over the course of the book. You're not going to have backstory to start off the entire book, because that just gets boring. So you want to slowly ease this in, and you do this through interactions with characters. And an example with Harry Potter would be, well, I'll get into that in a second. But basically, you just want to leak out backstory about your characters, not just the main hero, but also about your opponent and your allies and all your other main characters. You're also going to have your story world. This is going to be where the hero and the characters live. So, of course, it has to be very important. And with it, you're going to do things like list place names. What's the weather like there? What are the buildings like there? What are the people like there? What technology exists in that specific story world? What time is it? Like essentially, like what year are we dealing with? And also, what's important is the different parts of the story world should be a different expression of your hero. So whenever Harry's in a Dursley's house, what is he? He's depressed, he's neglected, he's unhappy, and then he goes to Hogwarts, and it's a different situation. Hagrid's house also gives you another different side of your character, and it's very important with your scenes to really think about, okay, when this character is in this specific scene, this is an expression of a certain information about their personality. It's very important, and it just adds so much depth to your story. It's really, really awesome. Okay, Harry, what's his ghost? His ghost, or essential backstory, that's what ghost means, is the murder of his parents by Voldemort when he's just a baby. This results in him surviving the killing curse. He becomes the boy who lived. And basically, the background basically creates a sense of isolation, a lack of true identity, a yearning for connection, a yearning for a family. And basically, throughout the story, the details on his parents are leaked in, his legacy and the circumstances of their death. And basically, through learning this, Harry is learning of his identity. Then we have the story world. I'm just going to cover two big areas. So we have the Dursley's house, like I said. This is a place that represents Harry's initial life, and it is a place that lacks love, lacks family, is full of neglect. It is not his true identity. It's mundane, boring, unmagical, obviously. It feels unwelcome. Then we have Hogwarts. Hogwarts serves as a complete opposite of the Dursley's home. It's a place where Harry finds his belonging, finds his identity, his purpose. It's filled with wonder. It's also filled with danger, numerous challenges, and so forth. And like I said, just ease this in as you are creating your overall story. And then what we're going to do is we're going to define our hero's main weakness and then the opening style that you're going to utilize for your story. So what is our basically when I talk about your weakness, it's going to be your hero's going to have normally multiple different character flaws, and they are basically ruining his life and ruining the lives of those that exist around them. The weaknesses are going to be, like I said, psychological and moral. And then we kind of covered a little bit about weakness, but this is a point where you can really define it and write it down. Then it comes to the point of, okay, how are we going to open our story? Well, there's mainly three main ways of starting a story. You're going to have a community start. And in this circumstance, what you have is your characters basically living in a perfect world. However, there's constant threats that are hinted at that could destroy this perfect world at any point in time. And those threats can come from outside the community or inside of it. Then you have what's called a running start. And this is the most common opening used in most books. In this situation, it starts off with the hero falls, their whole world's falling apart on page 1. Okay, that's what we're talking about, a running start. And you quickly provide a little bit of ghost explaining some information about the character, and then you just jump into everything's going wrong. The whole entire world is going to be full of threats, and the hero has many serious weaknesses that are going to become very understandable right off the bat. And there's a problem threatening the hero right on page 1 or 2 or 3. Okay. So that is a running start. Then you have a slow start, which isn't very normally used, but basically it's a situation in which a character really has no purpose. And over the course of the story, the whole purpose of the story is for them to find a purpose. We want to use Harry Potter as an example. Harry's psychological weakness, he suffers from deep sense of not belonging, low self-esteem. We sort of covered this a little bit. His upbringing with the Dursleys is terrible. Okay. And he has a lack of self-worth. Then we have our moral weakness again. While Harry is essentially a good person, his moral weakness is mainly found in just by being a naive child. His lack of understanding of this, once he gets to Hogwarts, he has a lack of understanding of how to operate in the wizarding world. And this ends up causing a lot of problems. He makes some sort of off the cuff decisions that bite him. So that's how he's sort of affecting the world negatively. And the opening style with Harry Potter is a combination of a running start as well as a community start. But it's mainly that way because of how the book goes from the Dursleys' home into the world of Hogwarts. It really leans more towards a running start. It presents a world where basically living with the Dursleys is not ideal. It's marked with neglect and abuse and all of those things. Like basically, bad things are hitting Harry from every direction. And actually, in chapter 1, we find out the fact that his parents were murdered by Voldemort. So that's more of a running start. It shows lots of threats immediately. But then we have also the community start where Harry goes to Hogwarts and everything's just peaches and cream. And he finally finds his place of belonging. Okay, so the next step is going to be you're going to have to create some sort of inciting event. This is going to occur at the very beginning of your story. And what it's going to do is it's an event that is going to cause, basically, it's going to connect a desire of your hero with action. So you're going to have to come up with a goal or a desire for your hero, and then a reason for this event to trigger them into action. That's it. And it's basically one of those out of the frying pan and into the fire type of scenarios. So when did this happen in Harry Potter? Well, it happened whenever the letters started coming from Hogwarts. That was the initial event. What was Harry's desire at the very beginning of the book? To get away from the Dursleys. And what event occurs? He starts getting letters from Hogwarts. And this basically makes Harry assume that he's getting everything that he desired. And instead, what ends up happening is, yes, he does get away from his miserable life with the Dursleys. However, what ends up happening is he's thrown into a world that is very complex, that he doesn't understand, with a ton of danger and a ton of mysteries. Okay? So it basically does the thing. It connects the desire to action. Then what are we going to do? Well, we're going to, over the course of the story, ratchet up desire. We want the desire to start off rather simple and then slowly get more complicated. And that is going to draw the interest of your reader and keep them interested. So how is this done with Harry Potter? Well, in the beginning, what is his goal? It is simply to survive and or escape from the Dursleys. Okay? And we get that desire and we achieve it. Then what's going to happen is over the course of your story, the desire isn't going to break and go in a completely different direction. It's going to bend and have a similar feel to it, but at the same time, it is going to change. So he goes from wanting to escape. He does that. Then he goes to wanting to explore his world. And upon entering Hogwarts, mainly his desire just shifts to exploring the new scenario that he has found himself into. Then, once he is well acquainted with the world of Hogwarts, what's it do? Well, it's to then achieve something. Okay, so he's aware of the magical world. Now he wants to achieve a certain level of greatness within it. After he is able to do that through Quidditch and other random events, then what's he choose? Well, he wants to find truth. He wants to find out more about his background, and he wants to find out more. That's where the mirror comes into play. He finds out more about his parents, more about his background, and overall wants to find out more about the Sorcerer's Stone. Okay? Once he gathers that information, then what's he want to do? Well, he wants to save Hogwarts. And under this, it's called Save the State. And so that's the next scenario. And then by the end of the book, he wants to go and elicit justice upon Voldemort. Okay? So you could see as the story progresses, the desires constantly change. They don't break, but they change and they get bigger and bigger. Then what you're going to need to do is figure out who your hero's allies are going to be. They are just simply going to be the other characters that are going to help your hero overcome the opponent and to ultimately reach whatever the hero's goal is. But they're also going to have certain goals as well. And for your main heroes, you should really fledge out what their desires are, their weaknesses, and how they will help your hero overall. And you can see it's exactly what I did right here. This is their main characters. And there's also going to be subplot characters, and their main purpose is to basically enhance your overall story. So, like a subplot character would be Draco. And what does he do? Draco is the opposite of Harry. He is basically a polar opposite image of what Harry is. And his subplot includes his rivalry with Harry, and it highlights different themes of prejudice and privilege and choice and the contrasting paths that Harry could go down. But also, also he could have become Draco because he was famous. He could have taken advantage of that. He just chose not to. Then you have Neville Longbottom, another subplot character. And basically his story is just a story of growth and self-discovery, much like Harry. He's initially portrayed as timid and forgetful, and eventually he develops to serve as a parallel to Harry, emphasizing different themes and bravery and self-worth. So he sort of also, to a certain extent, mirrors Harry. And later on in the book series, there was a lot of guesses about whether Neville was actually supposed to be the villain or the character, I mean, who defeats Voldemort. But that's late in the book. Then we have Professor Snape, another subplot character. Basically, he just adds tension and uncertainty. Like, is he the villain or is he not? He appears to hate Harry, and it just adds overall complexity to this story and raises a lot of questions about who is good and who is evil. We have the Dursley family. They represent Harry's life before the wizarding school. We have Quirrell, who starts off meek. He's the defense against the dark arts teacher who starts off meek and seems to be the weakest and ends up ultimately becoming the opponent with Voldemort. Then you have George and Fred with the Weasleys and all the different professors. Okay. So those are all the different individual characters and how the subplot characters really enhance the story, while the main allies are those that help the hero succeed. Then you have your opponent. This is going to be the second most important character in your entire book, because you have a bad opponent, it's going to be a bad book. Basically, their whole purpose is to prevent the hero from succeeding and reaching their goals. It's a very important relationship. The best opponent is going to be someone who is a necessary opponent that the hero must defeat to be able to reach their overall goal. And the opponent should be able to exploit the weaknesses of our hero. So if they're tempted by greed, the opponent should provide them an outlet to be tempted. Okay, so that's just basically it. Also, the opponent should be set up so that the only way the hero can defeat the opponent or villain is to overcome their weakness. And it's also normally very good to have an opponent that's hidden, at least in the very beginning. And there's a whole bunch of different ways you can hide the opponent. One common way is to use what's called the iceberg opponent. And it's basically the hero thinks this is their opponent. They defeat them. Then they find there's one that's stronger. They defeat them. And they just keep going down, like an iceberg. And before you create your opponent, you need to ask like certain questions, like who wants to stop the hero from getting their goals or, achieving whatever goals they have. What does the opponent want? What are the opponent's values? And they need to make sense. You can't have opponents that are just pure evil. That's just kind of silly. And one thing that when I was a young kid, character that actually I fell in love with as an opponent was in comic books. And I realized at a very young age that the character of Magneto was far superior to your average comic book villain. And it was because, yes, he was doing bad and terrible things, but he had a reason for doing them. If you don't know the story, Magneto grew up in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany and saw his family being killed because they were Jewish. And he is a mutant, and the people in modern day want to kill him because he's a mutant. And he sees his actions as being forced upon him because if he does not take effort at nullifying the power of the non mutants in whatever means necessary, that they will kill his mutants just as they killed his family. Okay. So it's just an example off the top of my head that I thought was interesting in regards to creating an opponent that makes sense. You definitely want an opponent that has justifiable reasons for doing bad things. We have our opponents in Harry Potter story as well, of course. Whenever we ask who wants to stop the hero, well, it ends up being Professor Quirrell. Harry thinks it's Snape the whole time, but that's not true at all. That would be an example. Snape would be an example of a fake opponent slash ally, which isn't that commonly used. It's very common to have. Well, we'll get more into that here, basically, in a bit. Why does Voldemort want to stop Harry? He wants to stop him because there was a prophecy that said that Harry would ultimately defeat Voldemort. And what does the opponent want? Voldemort wants, his ultimate goal is to come back into power and achieve immortality. What conflicting values does Harry have versus Voldemort? Voldemort values power, immortality, the pure blood supremacy, and this directly conflicts with Harry, whose life is about friendship. That's what he wants more than anything else, and equality between friends. What is Voldemort's justifiable action? It's kind of similar to Magneto. Voldemort's argument for doing what he does is that the Muggles are in power and they're oppressing the wizards, and the wizards should actually be in power. And if the Muggles aren't willing to cede power, then they'll take it. Okay, so it sort of makes sense. They also use the iceberg opponent inside of Harry Potter in multiple different ways. I mean, there's many people that come up as opponents, even Draco Malfoy. But then you have the trap door and all the different, enemies that they must defeat, and then ultimately get to Quirrell, and then ultimately get to Voldemort, which is really what's awesome about this book. The mystery, there's mystery also that's going to drive the plot inside of this. We don't know who the villain is until the very end. Like, even we think it's Quirrell, and then immediately it isn't. It's Voldemort. And along the way, Harry thinks there's many others. And basically, that's it. Okay, so that is just an overview of the opponent and utilizing mystery to enhance your stories. Then you have your fake ally opponents. And this would be an example of this would be Quirrell. Quirrell comes off as this weak type of character. And what they start off as being the opposite, and maybe to an extreme. They seem to be maybe even the hero's best friend in the book. And that is why a fake ally opponent is very important, because the plot is basically going to turn every time the hero discovers something new about their opponent, and a friend becoming an opponent is a major story event. And it also is going to increase the opponent's power overall in the story, because it's going to introduce mystery into who is the true opponent in our story. And anytime you can add complexity, the more interested your reader is going to be. Yeah, that's basically it. It's quite clear with Harry Potter. It's Quirrell who then becomes Voldemort, and there's a twist and a reveal right there at the key moment in the story. Then we're going to want to look into revelations and the different changes in desire, which we already touched upon how that can add interest to the story. The reveal is information that's going to basically force the hero to make a decision and move into a new direction, because the hero must adjust to their desire at this time, because otherwise the story is just going to stagnate. And each time you have a revelation in your story, it needs to be a bigger revelation. Just constant building and building, just like we did with the desires. The best reveals are those where the hero gets some information about their opponents. And the changing desire, like I said before, must bend from the original, not completely break into a completely different area, because then it just will get disjointed. Each revelation, at best, should be explosive and should increase with intensity. And like I said, you're just going to increase your revelations and the overall desires that your hero has over the course of your book. How does this happen in Harry Potter? Well, the original desire, of course, was to escape the Dursleys. The revelation, Harry discovers that he is a wizard and belongs in the wizarding world. He has a bent desire then at that point to um, not just escape from the Dursleys, but to survive an attack from Voldemort and all the other different dangers that come upon inside of the hog or the magical world versus the world that he was used to. Then we have the discovery of the Sorcerer's Stone. Again, Harry was trying to just integrate into Hogwarts, this new world, and then now the Sorcerer's Stone shows up and is a bigger threat to his world, and he has to now prove himself. And I get into, I think, in the next couple slides about how he goes to try to get help and so forth and fails over and over again. But you can just see here again, the revelations are bigger and bigger and bigger. First, he's a wizard. Then there's this deep threat with his Sorcerer's Stone. Then there's a deep threat with Voldemort. And he's basically being enclosed at all times with threats. Now, what we got to do is we're going to, this is exactly what I just mentioned. Over the course of your story, your hero is going to have a plan. It's going to fail. Their plan is going to improve. It's going to fail, and so forth and so on. So basically, the plan is just going to be a set of strategies the hero will try to use to overcome their opponent and reach their goal. Like I said, the first plan, second plan, third plan, fourth is probably going to fail, but each time the hero's plan overall is going to have to improve. So, how did this occur with Harry trying to protect the Sorcerer's Stone? Let's just zero in on one part of the story. Well, his initial plan was just simply to go to Dumbledore and say Snape is trying to steal the Sorcerer's Stone, and Dumbledore says, "I believe in Snape. You're wrong." And on top of that, he says that the stone's protected. There's nothing to worry about. And he basically just disregards the kids. And at this point in the story, the kids realize that they need to adapt because they are not going to be able to rely on adults to save them. So they know that they have to work together as a group, as kids, to try to protect the world from the evils of the Sorcerer's Stone. Then you have the confrontation with Quirrell and Voldemort. His initial confrontation with Professor Quirrell is not really a thought out plan. A lot of the stuff really at that point in time sort of happens accidentally in the story, and Harry just needs to react to the situation. But what he slowly finds is he's not able to use his power of magic to succeed. He ultimately ends up having to team up with his friends to succeed after they go into the trap door. And then after that, when he's in his most dire of circumstances, actually Dumbledore is ultimately there to save him because he put the spell on that only Harry could succeed. Okay. Then you have your opponent's plan. So you have your hero has their plans and the opponent has their plans. The opponent is basically going to develop a strategy to get their goal and execute different lines of attack on your hero over the course of your book. It's very important to hide the opponent's initial attacks so that you can have big reveals over and over and over again. So those are going to be attacked, or those attacks are going to be secret, unexpected, and they're going to surprise your hero. And anytime the hero is surprised, the reader also will be surprised. And each time the opponent attacks the hero, they're going to have to get stronger in some way so that they can continue on. The more intricate the opponent's plan and the better you hide it, overall, the better your plot is going to be. Your opponent will succeed with their plans pretty much the entire story. And eventually the hero is going to feel like they lost everything, which we'll get into here in a bit. But if we use Harry Potter as an example of different attacks on him, first we have the Forbidden Forest, and that's where we first get a sense of Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, where he kills the unicorn and drinks the unicorn blood. It's just evil and bad, and we know that there's something mysterious and terrible happening, and we're just not really sure what it is, and that's good. Why is it good? It's a mystery. We don't know what's going on, and that makes the reader anxious, and it makes for a better story. Then we have the troll incident, even though that didn't have anything to do with Voldemort, but It basically it forces Ron and Hermione and Harry to join forces to defeat the troll. Then we're going to have the overall eerie feeling of the curse of the defense of the dark arts professor, and how they always come to untimely ends, and Quirrell is one of them. Then we have those are hidden attacks. So you have sort of the Forbidden Forest. We don't know what's going on, but it's really bad. Then we have the troll attack, which comes out of nowhere, and then we have the overall curse on this professor. Those are sort of hidden. Then you have direct attacks. Those would be Quirrell's attempt to steal the stone, and the challenges that the kids must face once they go under the trap door. You're going to have different counterattacks from the opponent. This is just going to be scenarios where Harry has to learn to adapt. So his conflicts with Draco and so forth. We're going to have also, there's going to be situations where we dive into Harry sort of twisting his morality or maybe acting impulsively, also bad. And then ultimately we have our big giant reveal that Quirrell's the ultimate bad guy, and then another revelation, and that is going to be that ultimately Voldemort controls Quirrell. Okay, so lots of attacks, and it heightens the story. Then what we're going to have to do is focus on, okay, so we know the hero's going to have plans, they're going to fail. We know the opponent's going to have plans, and they're largely going to succeed. And then you have to really think about the series of actions the hero is going to perform to defeat the opponent and ultimately win. And this is going to be because the hero is going to be losing over and over and over again. They may ultimately become very desperate and start doing immoral things just to try to survive. And your hero is also going to, along the lines in the book, going to be gathering new information that they must implement to improve. And each time they fail, you're going to have to write out, okay, hero fails, but they learned this. They'll be able to use this next time to get better. Okay? So that's just how we can work. How did Harry learn from failure? Well, whenever he was forced to confront the troll in the dungeon, basically he joined forces with Ron and Hermione, and this teaches him the importance of teamwork. So after that first attack, what did they learn? Teamwork's very important. And then we have the detention in the Forbidden Forest. The detention basically serves as a crucial plot point where Harry and Hermione learn about Voldemort's attempt to seek immortality. Then we have the trapdoor. Each challenge they meet underneath the trapdoor that they face, they're gonna have to meet together as a group and use each individual's skills to be able to succeed. And I'm not going to get into specifics. Then we have the Mirror of Iriside. I believe that's how you say that. And then ultimately we have the fight between Quirrell and Harry, and Dumbledore basically comes in and saves him. All right. So, how will the allies then help the hero? So you plan everything out in the very beginning, and it becomes very, very easy to write the actual story. But it will change. Just because you write all this stuff doesn't mean that it's going to be cast in stone. This is just going to provide you with a nice place to lead. And whenever you ultimately get up to that point to write that part of the story, you're more than likely going to think of better things. But the fact that you have this plan in the beginning is going to keep everything going. So, whenever the hero starts, they're going to make illogical decisions and take illogical actions. And what this is going to do is you're going to have allies that are basically going to act as like the conscience or the lack of knowledge that the hero has to sort of put them back on track. So let's take our heroes here. So let's use Hermione first. What is Hermione's role in helping Harry? Basically, she's against rule breaking, and she is, unless there's a good reason for breaking the rules. And so what she does is basically stand in and make sure that Ron and Harry stick to the overall rules and an overall plan that she can use to basically help both of them succeed. And another thing she's going to do is basically make them aware of consequences that they are not aware of. They just want to jump in and basically fight And Hermione's there to say, no, wait a minute, there's consequences, and let's prepare for those before we jump in. We're then going to have Ron, and Ron's basically role there is just always to be loyal, but also to be courageous whenever Harry needs him to be. And then just as a group, they overall make for, the perfect little team for defeating ultimately Voldemort. Okay. Then we're going to have to, about three-fourths of the way, make it seem as if the hero has been completely defeated. And this sort of actually doesn't happen in Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling sort of crammed together everything in her first book, as we'll talk about here. But normally, about three-fourths of the way through the story, you want the hero to seem as if they've been completely defeated and they have no way of coming back. They're going to lose everything. They're going to lose all their money. They're going to lose all their friends. They're going to lose absolutely everything. And it's going to seem as if everything's over. And the reason why we do this is a come from behind win is more exciting than a overall dominating, fight. Normally here, as I said, the hero's money's going to disappear. They're going to lose absolutely everything. You're only ever going to have one of these in a story. Don't do this more than once, then it just loses all of its effect. And your main goal here, whenever you're at this point, is to figure out how you're going to destroy your hero and then provide them absolutely no way of succeeding. I mean, that is the goal here. Okay. And after we completely destroy the hero, we have to have a second revelation. If you can see that. Basically, immediately after losing everything, the hero must have a major revelation of some sort or another. And this is going to be something that is going to show him that actually here a victory is possible. Like I said before, sometimes when this happens, it forces the hero to start doing immoral types of things to try to succeed. Because mainly the hero's in a situation where they're willing to do absolutely anything to achieve the goal because they just lost everything. Okay. So at this point, you're going to need to figure out what your hero's second revelation is going to be and how they're going to proceed from this point to try to win. Another thing that's very interesting is to have reader revelations. Now, this is whenever the reader, but not the hero, and maybe no characters in the book, are going to have an important piece of information that the heroes aren't going to have. So this could be the identity of a fake ally opponent. Maybe it's another character learns how to defeat the opponent, but is, not immediately provided as help. Maybe they're incapacitated afterwards or something. And what's cool about this is in this scenario, the reader actually knows more than the hero. And it's just another way to make your story more interesting overall. It just provides an exciting pop. And normally this is great whenever you have a slow point in your story where you're like, what am I going to do here? Oh, I know. I can throw in a reader revelation, tell the reader some stuff that none of the other characters know. And another thing it does is it shows the true power potentially of the hero's opposition. And it basically just allows the audience to see certain hidden plot elements. And you can play these out in different dramatic, fashions. When did we have things like this inside of Harry Potter? Well, we did this right at the very beginning of the book, whenever we talked about Harry's being famous and how he faced off again as a baby against Voldemort. This was information that Harry was not aware of at the very beginning. Also, the Dursleys were aware of his magical upbringing. We knew that, and Harry did not know that. Voldemort's defeat and survival. We know that that Voldemort did indeed survive the attack on Harry, and Harry was not aware of that. And like I said, it just builds overall excitement for the reader. Now you're going to have a third revelation. Like I said, J.K. Rowling didn't really do this very much. Sort of crammed everything all at the very, very end and made it super exciting, but which you could do as well, obviously. But basically, immediately after losing everything, the hero is going to have a major revelation, as we talked about before. Something, some knowledge, some object is going to be provided that's going to show them that victory is possible. And at this point, previous to this, the hero had a specific goal, But now they're going to be willing to do pretty much anything, even die to achieve their goal. So things have become, really, really terrible. And you just have to think about this. And I guess we could talk about Harry in this regards. Harry realizes that his mother blessed him at the end of the story, and this provided protection from Voldemort. And because of her sacrifice, he now knows he has a chance. That, I guess, would be the third revelation inside of the Harry Potter books, where his original plan was just simply to protect the stone. Now he is aware. Now his new goal is to make sure that Voldemort doesn't come back into power. And overall, Harry's overall motives are going to be rooted in a sense of adventure and doing what is right. And after his revelation, his motive becomes more personal and urgent because Voldemort killed his parents. It's like a much more serious scenario. At this point, then we have either our gauntlet or a confrontation with death or both. We literally have a gauntlet in the Harry Potter book where they have to go under the trap door and then face off against each of the individual challenges, and then ultimately the ultimate bad guy is Voldemort. So, and on top of that, Harry very well could die. Okay, so all those things are all crammed together right there. And this type of event, of course, has to happen near the end. Whenever you have conflict between the hero and the opponent, and it becomes very unbearable for your hero to continue on, they basically must proceed through some type of a gauntlet and take on assaults in multiple different directions under this scenario, as happened in the Harry Potter books. And the hero is often confronted with some type of potential death, either their death or a death of a friend. Okay. So this is getting near the very end of your book. Then you're going to have your final battle, and it's very important. The battle is whenever your reader is going to find out who, if anyone, is going to achieve their goal, whether it's the hero or the opponent. And you might think that like a violent, crazy action movie conflict is what you want to be looking for here, but that's going to end up normally being really boring, because you don't have the visuals like you have in a movie. And the battle basically, his main goal is to make clear what each side that's facing off is going to be fighting for. And it should focus more on ideas and values, and which ideas and values win over just pure brute strength, which is boring. And this is basically just the funnel for your entire story. All your characters and the different lines of action are all going to converge at this one point. And the battle is where the hero usually fulfills all of their needs, also, and psychological and moral needs. And that needs to be made very clear to the reader whenever this happens. So you need to think here what's ultimately going to happen with your final battle, and what needs are going to be accomplished, and what values are going to ultimately end up facing off, not brute strength. And if you'd have like Harry Potter, his goal is to just prevent Voldemort from obtaining the stone. And it's more, Harry's world is a world of love and friendship, where Voldemort's is a world of power rules. And, those are, and, by any means necessary to achieve goals, and, bad versus evil. Okay. After you have this, we're going to have what would be a self revelation. And here, the hero is going to be completely changed. They've had their battle, they've had their needs fulfilled, they've reached their goal, or they haven't. And they're going to learn who they truly are. And it's best to do this in a shocking way, if at all possible. And facing this truth to who they are is either going to make them stronger or is going to completely destroy them. You can see that in so many books, Lord of the Rings. And they learn the proper way at this point to act towards others. And this revelation should largely be shattering for the hero, and must be a revelation they previously were completely unaware of. And what you want to do is make sure what the hero learns about themselves is meaningful. Otherwise, it's, kind of pointless. And don't have the hero state directly to the reader what they have learned. They need to show what they have learned through the actions that they then take, which were going to be different, self-sacrifice or something along those lines. And what happens with Harry Potter? Well, he finds out about the power of love, and his mother sacrificed her life to protect him. And there's other different conversations about the importance of choices and so forth between Dumbledore, but I think I sort of beat that up. All right. And then you get to your moral decision. This is going to be the hero learns the proper way to act, and now they must make a decision. What did Harry do? He destroyed the Sorcerer's Stone. Okay. And that's basically, the major event. Then after that, you're just going to go back to regular life. So once all of those desires are met and fulfilled, and you have your final battle and so forth, everything is going to have to basically end the book on some type of a happy ending or something. All right. Now, what I'd like to talk about now, that's basically a whole lot about plot. What I'd like to talk about now are different core principles I learned from countless different books in regards to crafting dialogue. And I'm not going to read all of these, I don't think, but basically you could just pause this and sort of look at it. I quantified everything that I could find in regards to crafting dialogue down into these couple different most important points. And you can, like I said, just hit pause and read these out, because I really don't want to sit here and read all of this out, which is what I'd have to do. So there we go. And character consistency and so forth and so on. So this is basically everything I learned about crafting dialogue. I just want to cover some other things that are, I think, better spent. Okay, so pause, pause, pause. Then we have unique dialogue and all the different things I was able to find from countless books in regards to how to make your dialogue unique. And there are some more questions that you can ask yourself. You're going to see in a minute whenever I show you character description sheets, how this information could be useful. Then we have the core principles for crafting descriptive text. And here are all of them. I think this is 2 or 3 slides after this. There we go. And you can just pause and read that information. And then we come to the final sort of point here, which I want to cover. What I did, some other little tips that I learned, and then I'm going to show you what a character sheet looks like, a scene sheet looks like, a symbol web looks like, and a couple other different things. But basically, I found a lot of benefit in reading a diverse amount of different types of literature. I even read some nonfiction books while I was doing this, and listened to audiobooks. You have no idea how many times I listened to an audiobook, sort of like half listen to it as I would exercise, or I would walk, or I'd run, or whatever, jog. And I'd be like actually creating the next part of my story in my head as I was listening to another book. Had nothing to do. What I was writing in my head had nothing to do with the book that I was listening to. It was just I don't know what it was. I found audiobooks to be very useful in regards to working through different problems. Another thing I found useful is I spent a lot of time coming up with different similes and metaphors, and I use a lot of similes and metaphors whenever I write. Really, I just think they enrich the story so much. Take lots of notes, always on your phone or whatever you have. You never know when you're going to think about some good idea to put in your book. So always have some way of taking notes, whether it's on a phone or a notepad or whatever. I learned a lot from reading poetry, even some of it I didn't really particularly like, but I just got better at writing descriptive text by reading poetry. I had a ton of fun researching all sorts of things. In my book, I get involved in transferring knowledge from computers to brains, and backwards and forwards between characters. And I did a lot of research in that area. I talk a lot about like some stock market stuff that I thought would be fun. Crammed that in the book. So I had a lot of fun with research, theoretical sciences, and so forth. It was really great. I'm going to show you what a character sheet looks like, a scene sheet, here in a minute. I'll also show you pictures of characters. I'll show you what my characters look like. I thought I actually made them using chat Dolly and so forth. I just would punch in information about what I thought my characters would look like, and then just kept messing around until my characters literally were created. Powerthesaurus.org. You have no idea how many hours I've spent over the last year just sitting with Power Thesaurus. It's just a website. It's the online free thesaurus. And I would just sit there and be like, I don't really like that word. I spent hours just changing words, finding the perfect word for everything. Scrivener, I'll show you what that is. That's the application I wish when I started writing my book, I was using Microsoft Word exclusively. And then I found Scrivener, and Scrivener was like the greatest thing ever. I'll take it. I'll show you what that looks like and why I think it's pretty cool. Don't feel frustrated. There were times where I didn't write anything for like a week and a half, and then all of a sudden I would spend like 2 days straight just dumping writing out. Just let the writing come whenever it comes. I did, however, always try to write something every day, but if it didn't come, I just moved on and did whatever I wanted to, my life. Like I said, you need to love your characters, but you need to torture them. Anytime I ever lost a character, I had to kill a character off, and it always felt sad, or I had to do something mean to a character, it made me sad. And you need to love and hate your opponent. You need to understand the villains as well as hate them just as much, just dump all that in there. I put a lot of my own life, sort of. No, I didn't use like people, real life people, but there's scenes that are in my book. There's a lot of scenes in my book that all happen to me in real life and in one way or another. And they normally, the more bizarre the scene seems, the more likely it actually happened. Like there's a scene that takes place in a brokerage office that happened. That entire chapter happened to me. That is one day in my entire life. It's like halfway through the book. It sounds ridiculous, and I guarantee you every single thing that happened in that chapter happened to me in my real life. I'll show you the symbol web here in a second, and ultimately have fun. So now what I want to do is I want to jump over. I want to show you what character sheets look like, what Scrivener looks like, what scene sheets look like, and symbol web. Okay, so you can see here, this is Scrivener. This is what Scrivener looks like. And it is just a here, let's see if I can I increase the size? There you are. Okay, so this is Harry Potter. So what I did with all my different main characters, my hero, I'd have a lot of information on them, and then my main allies I would have a lot of information on, and subplot characters have like just a little bit. But you can see here how I went and put all this information in about Harry. So I put in physical description, character overview, his personality, occupation, habits, mannerisms, weaknesses, moral needs, arguments. You can see all that stuff that I talked about in what preceded. They're all here. This is a character sheet for Harry Potter. And there's his allies, there's his opponents, fake ally opponents, internal conflicts. So I did all of that for my hero. Actually, for my book, I did way more. But this just gives you an overview of all the different things that I did for all my different characters. We could also, this is what I call a scene sheet. So this is Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And I had my designing principle here for my overall story. This is Harry Potter, obviously. How does the setting represent the designing principle? How will it oppose the hero's values? How will it represent the hero's values? And I go through all of this information. And if you do this, it just makes it so easy to write your story. See, I have sights, sounds, what's it smell like, taste, and all of that information. So that's Hogwarts. Here's a symbol web. In my story, I have all sorts of different symbols. So there's the lightning bolt, the sorting hat, there's the mirror, there is platform 9 3/4, the Philosopher's Stone or Sorcerer's Stone, whatever you want to call it, and Hogwarts, different houses. So each one of those are symbol web items. And like I said, whenever they appear, they just make you feel a certain way. What else do I have? Oh, let's just see here if I can show you how I sorted things out. All right, I think I can give this away. This is just sort of like the beginning of my story I wrote. But if you go, the way Scrivener works is you can have all of your chapters all here, and then write an abbreviation of notes of what happened. So let's just say I go into prologue. What I did was I can actually put notes inside of the prologue. Oh, here, I'll just show it to you. I don't think this is up to date. It's close to what I actually wrote. Okay, so whenever I would write, yeah, there's a couple sentences missing, but whatever. Okay, so this is a chapter that I wrote at the beginning. And if I go in here and actually write under here notes, these notes actually, this is Scrivener. This is why I'm showing this to you. I'm not showing it to you to sell it. I don't even have a affiliate link to Scrivener. I'm just showing it because I wish somebody would have shown me Scrivener when I first started. What's really great is you can write a brief synopsis of your overall story, and it's going to show up whenever you click on this little box that's up here. And then you're going to be able to see all of your chapters with a rough overview of what was written. And I found this to be extremely useful. And I don't know what Scrivener cost. I think it's like $50. It was so worth it. And I wish I would have had this when I first started writing. It would have made the whole writing process so great. But then I would just put in different information. Here's research. This is on something else I'm researching, like how do you defeat a super intelligence and all kinds of stuff. And this is where the character sketch is. I'm not going to get into exactly how Scrivener works. There's other tutorials on it. And another thing that shows up is if I click on this again, here's my prologue. You can see up here, this, if you don't know what this is Grammarly. I found Grammarly to be worth the amount of money that it costs to fix my grammar. If I made grammar errors, it would find them and I just click on it and it would be fixed. Okay, so there you go. That is an overview of pretty much everything I used to write my book and that I found very, very useful, along with all the tools and so forth. Hopefully, I don't know if you actually made it this far at the end of this video. Thank you. Drop me a comment. Say, I actually watched the whole video. I'll be absolutely amazed. But I just like to provide everything, even though it's maybe a little bit too much information. And hopefully somebody out there benefited from it in one way or another. So, like always, please leave any questions or comments that you have down below. And otherwise, till next time.